Hi, Dr. Schultz. Here's my video about Denmark's culture and how its culture impacts their environmental sustainability versus, how the US does things. This first picture here shows just one of the main streets that we went on every single day, especially when we were going to church. We would take this bus, or we'd stop here at this bus stop. And it just, I think, is a good example of a street in Denmark. There's barely any space allotted. You can see how wide it is, like between the buildings back there, and barely any of that space is allotted for vehicles to drive. Most of the space is for walking and biking. And I loved the little curbs that they had that allowed you to be separate from the bikes. When you were walking, the bikes would have to jump up on a curb to interfere with people walking, and cars would have to jump up on a curb to interfere with people who were biking. So it was a very just safe and pedestrian oriented design, whereas in the US it almost feels like the bike lanes are an afterthought, and while there is space to walk, there's a lot less access to crosswalks and stuff like that. My second picture here is of one of our favorite streets, that walking street downtown in Copenhagen, which really just was a very unique experience. There's one place in Seattle, which is really the only big city that I've visited in the United States. There's one place called Pike's Place Market that is kind of a walking area, but the majority of the city of Seattle is just hills and roads and huge skyscrapers, and it's not very fun to be in or accessible, whereas this street in particular was a great example of a place that just felt like comfortable to be in. And it's kind of weird because the Danish people were very standoffish at times, but they have these spaces that make the community feel close together. This third picture shows just one of the places as we were driving through Jutland, it was just like the roads we were driving on were like this. And we talked a lot about how they didn't have interstates or even highway level roads in a lot of places, but they had roads that were as wide as they needed and focused a lot more on the natural space of the country and appreciating that space rather than, paving over it. And similarly with the canals in Copenhagen, there was just that, this is more to show the density of the housing, which once again, I've only ever been to Seattle as a big city, I've driven through Salt Lake a few times. But the people live so close together, and this isn't like whatever skyscraper hotels. This is just people's houses, and it's a very good example of what the rest of the city looks like too. And then this final bit of the culture that I want to emphasize was the football games, just because that feels so different from the United States. We don't have like city teams for sports and just places that you can go to congregate. And I think this creates a very different atmosphere in Denmark from the United States, where everyone feels very united with their community. I think all of these pictures show that people feel together. They feel like they have a purpose in their community, and that they're not really like scared to just be in large groups, where I feel like in the US, we don't generally congregate with large groups of other Americans without paying a lot of money or to be in a big stadium in a big city, or having some other reason like church. Like, it's not US culture that unites us. So it's cool to see that.